trees. We get quite a lot in Scotland. There are more than 5,500 journeys of diesel-powered HGVs every day in Scotland. Are they suddenly magically going to be electric at 2030 on the end of December? It is another of my high horses. How many people will seek exemptions from controls on car emissions at the end of 2029? Now, we've already, and I know it probably, it might involve a lot of you, but those of you who've got Maseratis, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, those companies have already sought exemptions. I better look at Tim, because I'm sure he's Aston Martin. But who's next? Will it be Mercedes? Will it be BMW? Will it be the Audis tearing around Skye at the moment? Will the motorhomes and campervans? Are you going to seek exemptions to the new emissions rules? Are we suddenly all going to have electric at the end of 2029? Well, I'm not so sure. And I don't think trucks like that. Companies like Skye Haulage there and McGillivrays and Stevenson's and Stobart are all still buying diesel trucks. Now, presumably they don't buy them for a 5-year life cycle. Presumably those trucks are going to be around for some time. And I could say the same about cruise ships and lots of other big polluters in transport. Anyway, 5,500 journeys of HGVs like that. Skye, for the last 5 years, has had a net loss of 5 million trees a year. That is, 5 million trees is the net loss of forest cover. Right, next please, Tim. Well, what about the full case history for drags? Now, we often hear it's all about pine. It's often about Sitka spruces. But most of the trees that we get for biomass are hardwoods from the southern US states. And these don't have, oh gosh, who's it I saw this week saying trees are on a 3-year growth cycle. You show me a tree that grows in 3 years. Nettles, maybe. I think they envisage 30 years for a lot of Sitka spruces. But these trees that are being felled in the southern USA are on a supposedly 130 to 200 year life cycle of regrowth. Those things are cut down using heavy equipment, using tractors, chainsaws, whatever that are all diesel powered. The trees are then carried to the rivers, normally to the Mississippi, and they're transported to sawmills and pellet factories by train, diesel, truck, diesel, barges, diesel. Those pellets then come across the Atlantic, thousands of miles. And Colin's not here with his extensive knowledge of sea freight, but there is a problem with carbon monoxide poisoning. Not just in the pellet factories, but also on the ships as well. So those pellets come from ports like Baton Rouge and parts of Louisiana and Mississippi, and they come across the Atlantic. They go around the UK, to the East Coast, to sometimes Felixstowe, sometimes Birmingham, and they're put onto diesel trains. And then, again, we've got emissions. The pellets are then burned at drags to produce electricity. So, you see what I mean about full life cycle? Okay, a lot of Scottish trees are consumed, but a lot of American trees are consumed. The Americans export 98% of their biomass to Europe. 98%. Most of it wouldn't be allowed to be burned in about half the US states. And of that European burn, most of it is to the UK. It's going to be a very serious problem for the UK to get around. Deforestation, burning of coal, wood pellets. Right, next please, team.
Do they only make pellets from hardwood, or
No, they
can
do
you
make
make
them
you can
from
make them from the softwood
spruce as well,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but I think the American case is unusual in that so much hardwood are used.
Yeah, yeah.
Are used,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Are we on wind already? Oh, that's a surprise. Any other thoughts on biomass? There are. I'm told that most of the deforestation is cleaned up. That people go around all these hillsides and they collect all the bits of trees that have been wasted and things like that. Is that true? I don't think so.
There are little license to go around.
Yeah.
Stop it now.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, a lot is wasted. But there are also other biofuels as well. You know, you can make things from algae, you can make petrol from algae, you can do all sorts of things. Right, so I think we're getting to wind. I was told yesterday that there is a legal spacing of wind turbines. It's 6 times the length of the turbine blades. I don't think that is always the case. And before I kind of go on to worldwide, China is doing a lot on wind. China is installing more wind power than any other country at the moment. Next team. I don't know if you can see some of these. These are some of the problems. There's a lot still to be known about the aerodynamics of wind turbines. And this is in a particularly bad storm near to Aarhus in Denmark. And this. Here's they use the romantic term, the wind turbine has thrown the blades. That means they've come off and flown across the forest. So these are bits of blades. Here's one that really looks a bit sad, and here's one that's come off completely. So those, it's a reminder that wind turbines need maintenance. So they're supposedly, each turbine is maintained every 6 months. And I'd be surprised if that's the case.
Isn't the life cycle of a turbine about 30 to 40 years? That's what they're saying.
I've seen figures which are less than that.
25. 25. The Beneficio, when they put them up initially, so many people were allowed to invest locally, and they said it was for 25 years.
The main thing that does need the maintenance is the gearbox, which I don't know how many fires there are, but there are certainly some which have been quite devastating. Next please, team. Next. You'll be aware that some of these turbines have been landed at Karl and quite a lot of road modifications needed to be made once they've been lifted off the boats, having come from Scandinavia. Then those turbine blades were sent to Ashe airstrip for storage until they could be transported to near to Fort Augustus on Loch Ness. So quite a big transport procedure, which will be interesting if Holderness 2 gets underway. And I thought this driver had got lost and was going the wrong way, but certainly not heading for Loch Ness with his turbine blade over the Skye Bridge here. There is a very, that's on its way to the airport at Asher. There is a very interesting YouTube video showing the transport of some of those blades to Fort Augustus, and my view is that holding up hundreds of cars, which are then stationary or driving at very low speeds, is not the best way of traffic management.
Well, on one stretch coming back, we counted 75 cars, didn't we?
Yeah. Next, please. Well, this is a diagram just showing that it's not always just the unusual, what I would call critical metals, critical elements that are important. This is a relatively small 3 megawatt wind turbine, and we've got the tower, we've got this gearbox unit called a nacelle, and then we've got the turbine blades. Now, it's interesting that each turbine, that is one turbine, one relatively small turbine, needs 1,200 tonnes of concrete. At present cost, that's a lot of money. 335 tonnes of steel, 4.7 tonnes of copper wiring, 3 tonnes of aluminium, other materials including zinc and molybdenum, some lithium, cobalt and nickel, and there's a supply chain problem with not necessarily lithium, because there's plenty in Chile and there's quite a lot in China, but the source of cobalt and nickel from the charmingly described Democratic Republic of Congo is a problem. And then, of course, we've got the rare earth elements. Now, this is where the supply chain really gets to be very worrying, because vast amounts of rare earth elements are produced in China. They're mined, processed, mining and processed. It's important to think of that. The rare earth elements, the ones that we're really interested in, because these things need very powerful magnets. So we need these unusual metals like neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, and one of those, europium. So these are quite precious. We always think of precious metals like gold and silver and platinum and palladium, but these are going to be very, very expensive. Going back to cobalt, if all the cars in the UK turned electric suddenly at the end of the 2020s, we need 7 times the current production of cobalt on Earth. So there needs to be a vast increase in this metal production. And don't be surprised if I'm still around in 2028. Remind me that I said metals will get very, very expensive in 2028 or by 2028. We expect supply chain problems. But I think that's worth pointing out. I tend to use this diagram a lot because I've not seen any other diagrams that really include steel and concrete, which we need. Most countries need a lot of coal to produce steel. So we're back into this circular argument. Okay, Lucy, thank you. So what is the cost of a turbine? Depends on the site, but usually about £1 million per megawatt. It's about 3 million for a smallish turbine. But that does not include the cost of building access roads. And I don't know, I'm sure some of you know that there are plans in place by a company called Muirhall Energy to try to build a wind farm near to, it's called Ullinish. It will be called Ullinish 2. And that's somewhere in the kind of Caraway area. The access roads are going to be wherever they go from, whether it's the hill road over Portree or from Caraway It's going to be about 9 kilometres, so they have to build that access road. Replacement blades, yes, blades do need replacing, and these things will sometime need decommissioning. And most turbine blades at the moment are put into landfill. There are some schemes where it's converted into a kind of rubbery floor type material. But there are lots of costs. And my view is that no onshore wind project is viable without massive subsidies. There have to be massive subsidies for wind to work. Probably less so for offshore, because of the scale, but massive subsidies are needed. And what were you going to ask me about, Albertine?
Offsetting costs, offsetting emissions.
Yeah, there was a figure I saw this week that our bills, our electricity bills, had gone up overall by about £1 billion to offset the cost of subsidising wind farms. So that's one thing. The second one was, and this worried me a bit, that down in Galloway and Dumfriesshire, various landowners are being paid to shut up during planning disputes. They've been told they will get payments up to £123,000 if they will keep quiet during planning. You know, that to me is bribery. Now, thankfully, some of these fine citizens down in Dumfriesshire have said no. We will not accept your bribes. We don't want our part of Scotland ruined by wind farms.
The company is going to be taken to court though.
Yeah. So the countries that produce the most energy from wind at the moment are China, USA, Germany, India, Spain, UK, 20 megawatts, France, Brazil, Canada and Italy. Now again, I always think that some of these countries, it was brought home to me when I was thinking of something completely different, and that was shale gas in northwest England. And to me, the geology is all wrong. And I could speak for hours on why the geology for shale gas and shale oil is wrong in North England. But I was interested to see that the population density in the file around Blackpool, Preston, is about 1,200 people per square kilometre. In West Texas and New Mexico, it is 1.5 people, don't know which half, but per square kilometre. From most of the drilling rigs for shale gas, you can't see a building. You can't see another drilling rig. Such are these vast empty spaces. I could quote Texas, I could quote New Mexico, but also Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. There's nobody there. Nobody's going to be affected. No, so, that is a problem with covering the whole landscape with wind turbines. And it is one of the things, and again, it's not one of my, I have difficulty with wind turbines, I'm afraid. Is that it? The signal. So, the life cycle. Manufactured in Scandinavia, transport to Karlsruhe, transport to Grove Airport, transport to Stromlaeg wind farm. We've got quarrying costs for aggregate, cement, transportation, mining, of course, mining of all those rare earth metals, build access roads and decommissioning. What are the problems? Well, noise is a problem for some turbine operations. It's the kind of swoosh. Raptors, many millions of eagles and other birds have been killed in California. Collapse of the turbine, blade throwing, battery fires, visual impact. Intermittency is another problem. When the wind doesn't blow. And one new one that's just been brought to my attention by a colleague, the impact on radar installations. I didn't know that. So is wind really all that green? Is it renewable? Is it sustainable? We will see. Now, this Ullinish, the new project, it's an Edinburgh-based company with offices in Stirling and Perth. Original permission was for 14 turbines. In the replanning, they reduced this to 11, but they were going to be much bigger turbines, higher. Now, Muirhall Energy have put that up to 60. They haven't said that as one of the auditors in Portree has said, they are not being transparent over this. They've not explained where the 60 turbines are going to be, or even how big they're going to be. But it looks to me as though they'll go all the way from the hill road from Stirling to Portree, more or less covering the whole area to Ows, Galloway. Transport looks interesting. Again, they haven't actually managed to publish any details of transport, but once they leave Broadford and start heading for the kind of Dunvegan, Loosely area, there are some pinch points where they've got to either be reloaded onto other forms of transport or lifted to get around the corners. And there's a problem at Dunan. There's also a major problem at the Slig turn, where they will, instead of going up the Portree Road, they will go on the Dunvegan Road. Now, the problem with that is that Muirhall Energy want to build a new road and a new bridge. You know where the monument is at Slig? They want to build that behind that, so maybe bypass the corner. Now that's going to be fun. And then we've got problems at Struan as well, on the bridge there. These are big loads. Road access, there are those possibilities. The Hill Road, Alnwick, Geary Moor, and building a 6 to 10 kilometre access road. Or they've now come up with another alternative, and that is to take the turbines to Dunvegan and offload them from barges at Dunvegan. So, as of 3 weeks ago, Muirhall Energy hadn't contacted SSE because of obviously you'll be aware that SSE has big plans for distribution of electricity in Skye. And they are responsible for the upgrade of the pylon system, which again will be quite a difficult visual impact exercise. So, there are lots of problems that we don't hear about, and I think some of us worry that some of these things will be pushed through, and then they'll expect retrospective planning permission for some of these projects. Okay, the team. Not viable without massive subsidies. There's been quite a lot of argument in the West Islandry press recently about who gets the money. Now, the crofters a small number of crofters will undoubtedly get payments, compensation payments, which is all right and good. But between tells me that half will go to landowners or, Highland Council, Scottish Government. It's hard to know quite where some of the money will go. So, I think that's it. Is that it, Between?
I think so. Yep.
Okay. Right, well I've gone on for long enough. Any other questions? I've given you a handout which gives some idea of the content of the slides, but if you ever want more you can email it.
Yeah, looking at there's problems if you like with turbines. I think the one said is, if the wind don't blow, nothing happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't generally.
Yeah, I think that
We came through,
Incidents.
this is a big one, waters 2 weeks ago, and it just wasn't great, so they're not generating anything.
Yeah, I've been struck by the Edinburgh turbines in the last 3 weeks, really. Just how few of them are actually in operation. Now, some of them are identically down for maintenance, but if there's no wind, as you say, there is a problem. If there's too much wind, there's also a
There's
problem.
also a problem.
So do you have a figure for their efficiency?
It's about 50%. But of course, there is a location in Southern California. And if you drive from Los Angeles, kind of south of the Mojave Desert, and you go through Palm Springs towards Phoenix, you pass a wind farm with 15,000 turbines. Now, visually, it doesn't bother me because it's scrub desert, you know. But it is a very big. The reason it's there is that it's in a valley where the wind, you know, there are 330 days of sunshine in that area, so it looks good for solar. But the wind blows every afternoon, you know, 2 o'clock, the wind switches on, and it comes down through the valley and the wind turbines turn. But that's not 24 hours, that's just, you know, a time in the afternoon. So, you know, there are ideal areas. And, you know, I think some parts of the North German plain look pretty good.
And equally with the tide, you can tell the tide is coming in
Yeah.
when it happens both ways, so you get better efficiency.
It worries me sometimes that wind farm companies are actually paid to turn them off when the wind's too strong. You know, I think that is an ambition of failure. So, Charlie.
So two things. One was a clarification when you said about the trees on Skye. Did you say 5 million are disappearing every year?
No, that's Scotland.
Oh, Scotland. I thought that was rather a lot.
No.
I just misheard what you said.
That is for Scotland.
And then one of the things about the wind farms struck me in your passing comments was that what I think is one of the most beautiful roads on the Skye, actually, the Struan Fell Road, as I call it. The whole of that's going to be completely obliterated, really. Yeah. So I was just going to ask, is there an environmentally sound way of going out of here and committing suicide? Or what?
Well, Steve and I know a lot of the renewable energy presentations and asked questions, and we didn't get any answers with it. So they were a bit surprised that, first of all, that so many people turned up to ask questions. And you know, it does.
As you know, we come from Rotherham, I mean, don't go anywhere to the Rochdale area and look at any skyline without seeing wind farms. Charlie, you're not to glue yourself to the road.
That's true.
They are doing a similar exercise on Shetland, where they're taking a spine of, like the Trotnish Ridge, and they're actually just doing an extended one from sort of top to bottom at the moment.
Can I ask a specific quickie? Geothermal, never understood it. Sunday glossy magazines, you know, the adverts and things that show you pipes going a few feet underground and woo, hot water comes out. I don't understand that. Where's the heat from?
If you drill a hole, you can put a thermometer down the hole and work out something that's called the geothermal gradient. If you go down into a mine, it gets hot. Some coal mines are unpleasantly hot. There is a salt mine near to Staines on the Yorkshire coast. Yorkshire Teesside?
Is it potash?
Yorkshire.
It's potash. That is potash, yeah. They do produce a little bit of sodium salt, but it's mainly potassium chloride. That's the potash mine at a place called Bull. Yeah. And that is very deep. It's the second deepest mine in Europe. And it is unpleasantly hot down there and dusty. If you go down into some very deep mines in South Africa, diamond mines, whatever, it's very, very hot. So there is this geothermal gradient, and it's higher in some parts of the world than others. It's pretty high in Iceland, as you might imagine. You know, it gets hotter quicker as you go down. And some of that is released to the surface. And some of these hot springs, you know, okay, you know, go and stay easy. Probably not tell this story, but I went to a hot springs resort in California, and I was covered in. No, before that, they assessed me and they said, "My God, sir, what have you been doing to your body?" And then they covered me in this volcanic mud. And then they used high pressure hoses to hose you down. And then there was a kind of massage at the end of it.
Next month for you.
So, you know, there are a lot of these bubbling mud pools around. And if you go to the old faithful it erupts every, you know, it's not like lava, it's hot water steam comes out every minute or so. So there are these areas, like, you know, parts of Italy, and I've been on a surprisingly named volcano, which is called Vulcano on Sicily, and I regret it because every time you're breathing apparatus going in, there's this great quantities of steam and sulphur coming out, but it was very, very hot.
Yes, I understand all that, so if my question wasn't clear enough, but local domestic heating systems, you see they're advertised, and it shows you pipes just going not very far under the ground, and that's somehow water. I don't
They transfer the heat from below to the house.
What heat? It's just going down a few feet.
Tony's just been talking
Well,
about.
He's talking about deep mines. And
I've got some friends near Penrith that do it in their garden. And it heats the house.
My son's got a cottage in the middle of forest in Perthshire, and it's a air source heat pump, and the house is beautifully warm, but you have to be really well insulated because the heat isn't as much as you would get from electricity.
Several feet deep.
But if you look at parts of the UK, it's usually in areas, you know, okay, I'm back to my usual again. It's the water we get from these deep sources which we feed up to the surface and put into our pipes. In the UK, it's normally places where there are granites there. So there is, in Cornwall, there's a big project for geothermal. There's a borehole close to whatever Newcastle United's football ground is called for the moment.
That's why they bought it.
So there is a borehole there, which there's something called the Weardale granite and there's the Wensleydale granite, and those are areas of high heat flow. So basically this is going to be a deep source rather than shallow. But some of the shallow ones are directly getting steam and they're driving generators from steam. Italy, New Zealand, Iceland, parts of Oregon, parts of Washington, but they're using water in pipes to heating, not necessarily cooking. Anything else to do?
You were going to mention countries paying others to take their initiative.
Yeah. This is the whole basis of carbon transfer, where you can offload your emissions to other countries. And it's usually said in terms of the rich countries offloading their emissions to poorer, usually African countries. In exchange, they'll plant trees. Now, my experience so far is that there's not much tree planting gone on by companies who are trying to do this. So there's a lot of this offsetting is what I would call passing the buck. It's a sham. And it's not necessarily helping those poorer countries. So,
Money is payment is involved as well.
it can be, but it's not as straightforward as I think a lot of governments have said. And companies, you know, there are companies who are paying some of the mining companies are paying to offset their emissions. And some do it locally, Australia do it to Papua New Guinea, New Zealand do it to some other countries.
So what do you think we should all be doing? Should we be still burning coal, wood, oil? What's your opinion?
I think countrywide, I think there is a big part of nuclear in this. I don't think nuclear is completely the answer, because there are still not necessarily any good sites for burial of radioactive waste. I think a loss of trust by whatever the nuclear authority was called, wanting to bury radioactive waste at Doon Road and near to Rockington, Whitehove and Southfield.
That's what it is.
It's getting it out of the way.
Dream Beach, yeah.
Yeah. And,
Never be used again.
so that's not bad. I think that it's the time cycle that is worrying to a lot of people, and these wastes may go on for a long time, longer than people thought. The future may well be thawing, the element thawing, which supposedly, and the Chinese are aware, does not produce much in the way of waste. That might be. But, the French have been very successful with nuclear, but they're still having difficulty building power stations. It's what we drove past numerous times, and it was no further advanced, and as you well know, nuclear is not moving very violently back. It's not happening. Right, I'm going to shut up here, and Tim's going to say something wise and...
Just one quick question. Electric cars, would you buy one?
No.
No, right. Tell us why not.
That's the wrong answer then.
Would you get one eventually?
No.
You don't feel obligated to answer that. It's a personal opinion.
Sorry, Christy. Initial cost, cost of maintenance, very high cost of insurance, poor range anxiety,
Very heavy.
and I think the batteries, I've seen enough pictures of Teslas on fire to worry me. But, no, that's just my own view.
No, I think it's working.
Yeah, it's horses for courses. If you look at city use, local small use, they are much better. And I refer you back to the problems with fuel in the south of England recently.
Yeah, I had a friend who decided they were in Burgess Hill, and they decided that things were so serious that they had to get their Tesla out of the garage. They've been in the garage for 2 years. They had range problems. I think all the adverts you see for electric cars, the range is rarely what the manufacturers suggest it will be. And my further point is that I had a former colleague, and their company, which is a taxi and leasing company, they have returned their 45 Teslas at the end of the first leasing period. They always had to have standby cars available, and they have to Mercedes to actually have to stand by for when the Tesla
Petrol engine Mercedes.
So, it's arranged that most of their cars had to be in use most of the day, and there was just not time to charge them. They had as you probably know, electric cars don't do particularly well in cold conditions, but they don't do very well in high temperatures. Now, when they had their air conditioning on in the cars, which, when temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you need air conditioning. And that dramatically decreased the range of their Teslas. So, you know, I'm sure,
We're all right in Skye then.
I'm sure there'll be developments in technology. And just this week, Hertz have said they will buy a vast number of electric cars for their rental business. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Are they expensive to run? You know, when you charge your electric cars?
No.
It varies a lot. In Norway, it's more or less free. But in some parts of the country,
It depends on use, you see. If you're using it in the city for running around, it would only take an hour, 3/4 of an hour to charge it back to 80%. So you'd never use the whole battery. It is horses for courses. If you are travelling 500 or 600 miles a day to do work, no one's going to enjoy that because, you have to stop every 4 hours, 5 hours if you're running up and down motorways. But in cities, they're ideal, absolutely ideal. But
I see at the Cotswolds, they've insisted all the transport is electric, but they've hit the problem that there aren't enough chargers.
exactly, yeah. The infrastructure has to be there to start with to allow the industry to develop. Not develop the industry and then put the charges in. It doesn't work that way. But there we are.